During the very short life of Sega's Dreamcast, we saw a ton of racing games. Sega itself made sure to get Sega Rally and Daytona branded releases on it, as well as a number of new entries like Sega GT and F355 Challenge. Third parties flooded the platform with additional racing games like Metropolis Street Racer and Hydro Thunder. These well-known games are among many of the favorites that have endeared Sega's last console to millions of gamers across the globe. But what about the software that slipped through the cracks and are perhaps a bit less well known or not taken quite as seriously? Did a cel-shaded racer have a harder time against its more realistic and serious competition? Did racing jet skis and snowmobiles not grab you quite as much as the licensed muscle and luxury hot rods you dreamed about as kids? In this episode, we will take a look at some racing games on the Dreamcast that didn't quite fit the mold of what you usually look for in the genre. Some were futuristic, some were silly, and some were just straight up weird. That doesn't mean they were bad games though. I hope you guys enjoy oddball racing games for the Sega Dreamcast. Video game speedboat racing is nothing new. I've played a number of 2D and 3D entries into the genre myself. Heck, Hydro Thunder on the Dreamcast is one of the better pure arcade racers on the platform. But Aqua GT here, released in December of 2000 by Take-Two Interactive, just doesn't have the same get up and go. Whereas Hydro Thunder embraced the fantastical with huge jumps and outlandish locations, Aqua GT keeps things grounded in reality, much to its detriment. It doesn't play or look particularly bad, but it lacks any excitement at all. You start out slow and work your way up the classes to get faster boats, but the journey is long and fraught with boredom. These waterways are just windy canals that lack any real obstacles or jumps. It does have a cool time of day effect that changes the low and high tides for each stage, but it's little help to the otherwise snooze fest it becomes with extended play. This was only ever released in PAL territory, so many of you may have never played it before. I can't say it's worth tracking down a real copy and is much better viewed as something to try via emulation. If you want to race boats, fire up Hydro Thunder and don't look back. On the flip side of exclusivity comes the North American only release, Demolition Racer No Exit. Released in October of 2000 by Infogram North America, this is a port of the PlayStation game Demolition Racer with additional content and improved visuals. There are a few different modes here to try out. One is racing on a closed circuit track while trying to score damage points and avoid being destroyed. Another has the same purpose but puts you in a Destruction Derby style arena where there is nowhere to run. The main point of these modes is not just to survive or be in first place. You must damage the other vehicles to get score if you want to progress. The biggest issue with the gameplay is nothing seems to have any weight to it. Hitting a car is like hitting a cardboard box. This makes the control feel floaty and imprecise. As for the graphics, it looks like a PlayStation game running at a better resolution. But man, those models are rough. It can be a good time here and there thanks to the Destruction Derby portion, so I do recommend giving it a go, especially in multiplayer. There's worse ways to spend an afternoon on the Dreamcast. Growing up, I loved Looney Tunes. I watched it every Saturday without fail. Even as I got older, I appreciated the antics of Bugs Bunny and pals, so seeing a racing game based on the IP caught my attention right away. Looney Tunes Space Race was launched on the Dreamcast in November of 2000 by Infogram. Here you can pick from favorites like Yosemite Sam, Sylvester the Cat, Elmer Fudd, and Daffy Duck. You get to race around 12 tracks mostly based on other worlds. Like most games of this type, you have access to weapons to help you deal with your competitors, and man are they both fun to use and irritating to have used against you. You can drop elephants on heads, zap others with laser pistols, and even create holes in the track. These weapons are everywhere and it's a constant fight for position and survival. The 4-player split screen is perfect for your family and can lead to many a hilarious battle. The cel-shaded visuals are gorgeous and hold up quite well today. There's also a few other modes like time trial and challenges to keep you playing. I really enjoyed this one and highly recommend giving it a go for a nice change of pace.
My secret weapon. Gotcha! Better hidden than me. Survival of the fittest.
No. You're doing it all wrong.
Try this one on for size.
Magforce Racing was released in July of 2000 by Crave Entertainment and is a port of the PlayStation game Killer Loop. It takes the futuristic route of racing magnetic tripods across huge city tracks. You'll need to keep your energy up to go the fastest you're capable of, and you'll need magnetism to ride the walls and ceilings, both of which are spread out all over the track as the green and yellow patches you see. You get laser beams, rockets, and other weapons to defend yourself, and of course multiplayer is here to keep things interesting. This one isn't bad, but it does lack the excitement of games like Wipeout. The music is nowhere near as good, the weapons don't have the same impact, nor does it look as nice. And that really is Magforce's biggest shortcoming. It does nothing to pull you away from the better games in the genre. A few laps around a few of the tracks and you're done. You really don't need to see much more. When I got my Japanese Dreamcast, one of the games that came in the bundle was Pinpen Trisalon, developed by General Entertainment, who also was responsible for Godzilla Generations. To put it mildly, I was not happy I had to pay for this. It wasn't my kind of game. But for what it's worth, there is a game here that is very much a family experience. The gameplay is fairly easy to come to terms with, and it certainly is happy and colorful. The gist of it is simple. Pick your racer and run, swim, and slide your way to victory. Each track has different segments where you have to take the appropriate action. There's a short, medium, and long version to challenge you, and of course the 4-player mode adds all kinds of replay value for the youngsters. To this day, I can't stand this in single player, but racing with my daughter and wife gave me a newfound appreciation for it. It's goofy, silly, and a bit irritating, but it's got enough charm in multiplayer to make it worth your time. Infogram handled the Western publishing of this one.
Hey, you really do it, don't you?
Ubisoft just had to get in on the Dreamcast racing action with Pod Speed Zone, a sequel to the PC original Pod. It was released in December of 2000 and is another futuristic racer with weapons, shields, and turbo boost. It runs great and has sharp textures. The tracks have different routes you can take. It even has online play and supports the broadband adapter. On the surface, it seems to have what it needs to be a great game, but there are some problems here that hold it back. The weapons are kinda weak and the hit detection and physics engine leaves a lot to be desired. It doesn't take much to send you careening off course. The slightest bump in the track or hit by an opponent can really mess a race up. It just doesn't feel like the better designed products of its day. That's not to say it's complete garbage, however. The fast and smooth frame rate and multiplayer will appeal to many of you, and it's quite affordable today. I'm mixed on this one, so I advise you try before you buy. One of the stranger releases for the Dreamcast was Snowcross Championship Racing, which was released in December of 2000 by Crave Entertainment. It featured snowmobiles, something you didn't see every day in these types of games. Unfortunately, this PlayStation port is rough around the edges, something fierce. The visuals are moved over almost untouched outside of a bump in resolution. It's an exercise in low polygon models, simple tracks, and gameplay that never feels fun or exciting. I couldn't control these machines worth a damn. I was all over the place. There is a weird pull to the steering that I just couldn't adjust to. After about 15 minutes, I had about all I could take. All these years later, I sat down to give it a go again, and nope, about 15 minutes is all I could tolerate. Snowmobile aficionados may find this a perfect simulation of the real thing, but for me, this is a throwaway title I grew tired of incredibly fast. Ubisoft handled the European release. I'm a big fan of South Park, and I wanted their rally game to be a winner. It seems to have everything: the raunchy humor of the show, its characters, and its settings. How could things go wrong? Launched in June of 2000 by Acclaim Entertainment, the gameplay is absolutely terrible. The collision is bad, the graphics are pure Nintendo 64 simplicity, and the game modes are pure torture. Instead of being a pure kart racer, it mixes in objective-based matches like capturing items and holding on to them. The problem there is the gameplay isn't good enough for this type of thing, and madly circling the tracks trying to ram your opponent grows tiresome fast. The truly sad thing is that it had everything it needed to be a winner. The voices were there, the weapons had hilarious options like throwing prostitutes at your enemies, and the Easter eggs were all over the place. Had they kept it a pure racer with tighter gameplay, it would have been a classic. As is, avoided at all cost. Curiously, the developer of this one was Tantalus Interactive, the company behind the Saturn ports of Wipeout, Manx TT, and House of the Dead. You would have thought they would have learned more working with such high-profile titles.
Oh! For me?
$10 away, $5.
Feed me!
I played Star Wars Episode 1 Racer first on the Nintendo 64. It was simple, but I enjoyed it for what it was. It had that Star Wars vibe that was just enough to make the gameplay seem unique. I expected big upgrades on the Dreamcast edition, released in April of 2000 by LucasArts, yet what we have here is so disappointingly similar. Low polygon models and sparse trackside detail highlight an engine in desperate need of more. The gameplay itself is still easy enough to have some fun with, and it supports 4 players, so it's far from a bad game. It's just my expectations for a major graphical overhaul really let me down. And since I had played it elsewhere before, there was just so little here to get excited about. It's worth a play if you've never had the pleasure, but if you've seen it on other platforms it's available on, this has absolutely nothing going for it to have a second look. Modern consoles have a version for $15 if you really want to play it. Sega's Wave Runner series of games were incredibly fun arcade racers that simulated riding a real jet ski. Since those games remained arcade exclusives, old Surf Rocket Racers here was about as close as we got. Unfortunately, it was nothing special despite being developed by CRI. Unlike many of the other games here, this one was exclusive to the Dreamcast, so there's no excuse why it's so plain Jane. Where's the arcade-like visuals, the killer special effects? The original Model 2 Wave Runner looked better than this and was years earlier on much less capable hardware. The gameplay didn't see any special additions either. By the time this was out, Nintendo's Wave Race had shown up and played a ton better. Its main failing was it didn't offer anything that stood up well next to the other games available at the time. Instead, it was so ordinary and pedestrian, so unexciting and boring, a sad reminder that Sega had better games in its back catalog and we were never gonna see them. Crave Entertainment released it in the US, while Ubisoft handled the European edition. Some of you may recall the old Hanna-Barbera cartoon Wacky Races, which was reborn as a PC and PlayStation game before it was moved over to the Dreamcast here by Infogram. Cel-shaded graphics immediately put you in mind of the earlier Looney Tunes effort, but this actually plays quite a bit different. There's a hub world where you pick your area to race, and the better you do, the more activities you unlock. Most of the gameplay is kart-style craziness, where weapons and special abilities play a big role. The actual control is super simple and your vehicle sticks to the road like glue, making it easy for youngsters to play. Its biggest problem is that the AI runs in a pack that is always right on top of you. It gets so bad on the tighter tracks it drives you crazy and can make some of the tougher races quite a challenge. Still, there is fun to be had with 4 players and it certainly isn't ugly. There's a version of it on the PlayStation 2 as well.
It's the second lap.
Coming through.
We made it, Todd.
Let's go ahead and tally up what Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour offers us. It's developed by Crystal Dynamics and published by Eidos Interactive. Its tracks are inspired by the rides and attractions at Disney World. The characters are mostly original creations just for this game. It's got the ingredients of something special. But for all the positives, none of it does a thing to help the poor performance, so-so handling, and terrible setup. First, the only characters here I know and have any appeal at all are Chip and Dale. Second, the AI is crazy good and destroys any chance of enjoying this with your kids. I've had perfect races that had me fighting for 3rd place, leaving any chance my family had at enjoying it completely crushed. But it just doesn't play well enough or look good enough to be worth the hassle. Kart racers were actually quite abundant on consoles at this point, so there are numerous better options, Looney Tunes Space Race among them. After a bit of reading, I realized this was a PlayStation game first, and another company called Prolific Publishing actually did the Dreamcast release here. That explains the jumpy frame rate and middling visuals. In September of 2000, Midway brought a port of its arcade racer San Francisco Rush 2049 to the Dreamcast. This one is all about the jumps. Every track is loaded with them, and there are even aerial moves you can do in the home version you couldn't do in the arcade thanks to the new stunt wings you can use. It's clearly based on the Nintendo 64 conversion, so it's not quite arcade perfect, but it's still smooth and sharp, complete with a perfect physics engine that really makes the huge jumps stand out. As you might have guessed from the title, this is based on a San Francisco in the future, so the tracks are huge and wide open with lots of places to ride the walls and get yourself killed. It supports 4-player races, which are just awesome if you have the controllers for it, and it has a ton of tracks and cars to choose from. Pound for pound, there is a fun factor here that really stands the test of time. Grab the wife, the kids, the neighbors, and anyone else you can find, and you'll have one heck of a party with this one. In December of 1999, Acclaim released Revolt, an RC racer featuring over a dozen tracks and a bunch of cars to unlock. There are stunt modes, 4-player races, battle modes, and of course a championship to win. I always dug this one because the engine really feels like you are driving a remote-controlled car. The way they feel with jumps, the way they feel in collisions, I mean the entire physics engine is just brilliant in its execution. You also get some pretty neat tracks to race around, including a neighborhood street, a supermarket, a museum, and much more. There's a ton of little details with the cars, like how they are powered, whether they are front, rear, or all-wheel drive, and your choice of arcade or simulation style control. It can irritate you with the aggressive AI, but it's a blast to play otherwise. A rare multi-platform gem from Acclaim. Team 17, the company behind the Worms titles, published Stunt GP in June of 2001. It was developed by Halifax, who was involved in numerous Dreamcast ports like NFL Blitz 2000, Soul Reaver, Code Veronica, and MDK2. Here they did an RC racer that isn't quite as good as Revolt, but still has a bit of fun all the same. It has many of the same modes as Acclaim's take on the subject, including some cool themes for the tracks, lots of customization, and unlockables. The vehicles are a bit too heavy, and the gameplay takes a hit due to the jumpy frame rate, but this is not as bad as many people claim it to be. In fact, I'd go so far as to recommend it if you enjoy the lighthearted theme this presents. Adjust your expectations and it can be a night of good fun for you and the family. On 9/9/99, Acclaim and Criterion Studios got together for Trickstyle, a hoverboard racer that has loads of tricks, multiplayer support, and some fairly nice graphics. The gameplay here really stands out on this list. There's just nothing else like it on the Dreamcast. You race all over the globe in futuristic settings that are both familiar and alien. This one really has grown on me over the years and definitely offers something different as far as racing games go. I'm actually shocked Acclaim didn't continue this with a few sequels. It certainly deserved one. A few tweaks, and this could have been a heck of a series. The multiplayer-only toy racer was a European exclusive released in December of 2000 by Sega and developed by No Cliché. It's a spin-off of the action game Toy Commander. It was a budget release where 20% of the sales went to children's charities in the region. It was scheduled for release in the US but never made it out. It's an extremely simple racer in all aspects. There's items to pick up, but it's nothing exciting and the visuals are fairly rudimentary, kinda like an indie release, but it at least runs smoothly. Since it was designed for multiplayer, there is no computer-controlled AI here to race against in single player, meaning that it's basically useless on its own. You can drive around the environments, but that's pretty much it. I would have loved to have seen a full release of this with a complete budget. By December of 2000, Sega knew it was going to drop the Dreamcast, so I guess we're lucky we got anything at all. Taxi 2 is a movie-based racer that was only released in France in November of 2000. It was published by Ubisoft and features missions running through city streets trying to beat the clock to the next checkpoint or outrun certain characters while doing missions. I've never seen the film, but the game here is quite forgettable. The missions are mostly window dressing for the racing engine that lacks any real excitement at all. You basically barrel down city streets for much of the game, full speed without much to worry about other than following the arrows. Somebody must have loved the hell out of it though, because they decided to do an English translation for it. Yep, you can play this French exclusive in English today. I can't say it's much here to look at, the music isn't to my taste and I grew bored with it fairly quickly. There's worse games on the Dreamcast though, so it might be worth a shot for some of you. Among the oddball racers for the Dreamcast, none stand out quite as much as Zusar Vasar. Released exclusively in Japan in July of 2000 by Real Vision, describing this as a chariot racer does it no justice at all. You see, in this weird and wonderful release, you are pulled by robotic animals. Panthers, lions, elephants, hawks, crows, sea turtles, dolphins. I mean, this game is straight up insane. As you might have guessed from the description there are air, land, and sea races to take part in. Choose your animal and then your sled, which then creates a combination with various abilities. From there you can do a normal race or combat race, which basically amounts to racing with or without weapons. The weapon-based matches are a free-for-all, where weapons are constantly going off and you are being smashed by the AI. This will give you an appreciation for the races without the weapons, but either way, you gotta appreciate the insanity here. I mean, you are being pulled around tracks by robo-animals in what amounts to chariots that resemble the Batmobile. I can only assume the developers took one look at Star Wars Episode 1, smoked a bit of ganja, and had a laugh making a game for the next few months. I guarantee you'll never see anything else like it, particularly the air chariots that control the steering with the left and right triggers. Some will tell you it's not that great, but I'm telling you, it's worth playing almost exclusively for the crazy themes alone. Despite a few negative opinions here, I do advise you at least try these games. Most of them support the VGA box, and many include multiplayer for 4 racers. Some of the appeal may actually come from the license itself or the type of vehicles you use, so your mileage could differ from mine incredibly. I think a lot of these suffered what many Dreamcast games suffered. They came from lower spec consoles and failed to impress as 6th generation offerings. They were often untouched ports made by the usual suspects that love dumping average games on every platform under the sun. I mean, you stick most of these side by side with their Nintendo 64 and PlayStation counterparts, and it's sad to see just how similar they are. Outside of a boost in resolution, it was the same models and effects as before. And I don't know about you, but I wanted more out of my Dreamcast. That's not to say you can't find fun in quick and dirty ports. I enjoyed a few of these and I think you will as well. I just don't think many of these showed the Dreamcast in a positive light at all. In fact, I'd even say they contributed heavily to the notion that the Dreamcast was underpowered. As you know, the Dreamcast had an unenviable position of being caught between generations. As the first 6th generation console, it was home to countless projects that came from the era before it. Looking at software like this next to the better games out there is like looking at 2 different pieces of hardware. And if it's one thing Sega could have really used at that point, was consumer confidence that its new machine was built for the long haul. With all that said, there are still some winners here worth investigating, and a few even worth owning. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.